I am so excited to be joined by Tom O'Keefe and Jennifer Axelrod. Tom and I worked together at Smoothie King, where he was president and I led the marketing team. And while I've just met Jennifer, I know we're going to be fast friends. For a little bit of info on our guest today, Tom currently advises would-be franchisors on how to approach franchising. He lends his experience and expertise to guide new franchisors as they begin their journey. He's a franchise executive and practicing lawyer specializing in this space. So he's a great resource for everything from filing your FDD to setting up your operations manual. Jennifer has her CFE and works for A Place at Home as a franchise performance coach and has spent over 13 years passionately supporting small business owners in building healthy and profitable businesses while raising a family of her own. I am so excited to jump in with these two on the pressing questions that we have from the franchise community. But first, I'm going to kick us off with a little segment called Hot Takes. So I am going to put Jennifer on the spot and ask her what her hot take is this week.
Okay, not a problem. When I thought about all the hot takes, I wanted to obviously take in consideration my expertise. So, of course, it's going to be around marketing. Here is my hot take. I want to talk about striking the balance between local and national campaigns. I want to look at the effectiveness of national marketing. So across the board versus locally driven initiatives. Is there a right balance? I think this could drum a lot of conversation.
Yeah.
Or are franchisors a little too rigid because they don't understand that local community feel and what needs to be in the marketing? So that's what I was thinking. I have a couple of discussion points that could kind of get us started. I think.
Well, I'd love to ask you your thoughts on it. So I would probably come at it from a different point of view too, because I would ask the question of, do we expect too much from our franchisees as franchisors? And so I'm interested to hear kind of your perspective, especially with your boots on the ground experience, kind of what should we expect out of our franchisees from a marketing perspective, and can we localize it?
Okay, so the first thing I want to kind of point out is so crucial, and you do that right in training or even in the FD process. You set that expectation right up front. What is that role for the franchisor and the franchisee? And if you have that at the beginning, then they go in knowing that they're going to have to do the boots on the ground. If you don't do that, they come in thinking that national campaign is their brand awareness and that phone is going to ring. We hear this all the time, right? Yeah. So that clear expectation is so key. And they're both important, right? They're both important for brand awareness and franchise growth. And what we saw in the pandemic, especially, is staying competitive. So when Facebook ads started not working for, let's say, a franchisor I was working with, we had to get, we didn't put the money into to Facebook ads anymore, and we were losing that brand identity. Right. So it's really, so that kind of is that field. Should we still be putting money into brand awareness versus holding back and then pushing a little bit more the local feel?
Yeah. Yeah. And so when you think about that local feel, where do you see that being where does the localization come from for you?
Okay. I think the local branding is so important. When I go and I coach a franchisee, and I've said this for every franchisor that I work with, you have to go in and you have to be the mayor of your community. You have to be seen, you have to be known, and you have to get involved, and that's giving back as well, right? Yeah. So you cannot just rely on what the franchisor is going to do for you. We know that there's cultural differences, there's technology differences. Some of them aren't going to be comfortable online, but they still have to have that brand presence. Yep. I think it's key. I think when it comes to marketing, I don't want to say 80-20, but maybe 70-30 on the franchisee. Okay. Yeah. What do you think, Tom?
I agree totally with the local marketing piece. I think that a franchisee must own the four-wall marketing. They have to own their community. They live it, they breathe it. They exemplify their brand in their community. I don't think you can overstate the importance of it. I think one of the harder things for a franchisor to do is to monitor that aspect of the spend. In many cases, it's left to the franchisees to spend it on their own, almost like an honor system. And I think also franchisees have a tendency to misinterpret when they read that an advertising contribution, whether it's local, national, regional, co-op, is a minimum of X%. I train franchisors when they sell. It should be, look at it the other way. I'm sorry, they look at it as a maximum. You want them to say, is a minimum, and the
Right.
smarter ones, the better business people, they will overspend that amount. And I think that when it's stated in terms of the minimum, maximum, and it's left to basically the honor system of you spend it and then we'll follow up to make sure it was spent, I think that's a little bit of a trap, because to me, I put that as it relates to a franchisee ahead of the brand building contribution, because the brand building, that's more the franchisor's obligation, even though the spend is coming from the contributions from both franchisees and company stores. But the local, that is completely the franchisee, small business owner's path to success, to be honest.
Yeah. And they don't come in as marketers, right? A lot of
Right.
them don't know anything about local marketing, or they're scared completely to get out there.
Well, and I'm sure I don't have to tell you to this because this is your field, but I've always found one of the hardest things to do is to convince a franchisee that if they put $1 towards marketing, it'll translate to $2 in sales. So you're almost proving a negative from the jump, and that's really difficult. But then you point out, if you look at these huge brands, Coca-Cola, Budweiser, whomever, they still continue to spend millions and millions and millions of dollars on advertising. So
Yeah.
there's no sort of like getting to a certain point and then just pulling back and not doing it, because the public is fickle and they'll forget about you fast.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there's somebody right behind you about to take your
Yeah.
place too, every
Right.
time.
Right.
I completely agree. It's so important to do that local marketing and just never stop. I love when you go years and years with a franchisee and then they think that they can maybe stop that marketing just for
Right.
a little, right? They'll rely on the heavier, more broad marketing, maybe billboards or radio or stuff like that. I think when it comes to marketing, it's all about intention, right? So is it conversion that you're looking for? Or are you looking for brand awareness? And I think from both perspectives, franchisor and franchisee should always have a little bit of brand awareness in their marketing dollars. But at a local level, you really want to work on conversion.
Yeah.
Building relationships that are just going to bring you referral business and never stop. And then that goes into Google reviews, right? If you provide the quality service, then you're building a referral business from the business that you're delivering.
Right.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And so I'm gonna jump in with my hot take because it's kind of in the same vein from a marketing perspective. So my hot take is social media isn't free advertising. There are so many brands that I join, and one of the first things that they do is ask their franchisees to jump on an Instagram account because it's free. And so I cringe because it's not free. It requires strategy. It requires content creation. It requires community management. It requires the time that all of that takes. And so when we think about that localized marketing, one thing that I've been preaching is we can only ask our franchisees to do 3 to 5 things. If one of those things is social media, great. Let's develop the tools and resources to help them execute on that. But if one of those 3 things is not social media, we need to pull it back, because social media is an awareness tactic. And unless the franchisee is using it as a conversion tactic, Jennifer, I think that kind of analogy was perfect. Localization on conversion, brand fund on awareness. If you're not converting from social, your franchisees need to be doing activities that are converting. So I think we're aligned on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Social media is a funny thing because it always does need to be there. It's how a franchisor can structure it. And if you can hire a vendor to manage it, to just make sure it's there so that brand identity doesn't get lost, you know, it's funny because it can go both ways. You give them the flexibility to be themselves and be creative, and then you want to pull down some of their stuff because it's not
Or you want to
brand,
kick them to start
or
posting,
you want to
right?
kick them to do it.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what I always say when it comes to social is to show that local feel. You gotta show the community that you're in.
Mhm.
So if your community is engaged in, let's say, so for us, you know, it's home care, you know, elderly food, and joining, you know, the Alzheimer's walk. Those are things that are important to this specific community. That's what should be in the social media marketing.
Yep.
Right. But I'm with you. Strategy. Some
Yeah.
people just start an Instagram account. They have no idea what they're doing.
Right.
And they're just throwing stuff out there with no connection, no intention. Another big piece of that is Google Business. We know
Yep.
this. It's
Yep.
not utilized the way that it is a free tool, absolutely, but it needs to be utilized.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a whole teaching for franchisees. It's a
Mm-hmm.
whole thing. So again, hire a vendor to watch your reputation management. Hire a vendor to populate posts if you have to, at least at the beginning. So you know that the brand is protected. Because I think at the beginning, on an emerging franchise, you really got to protect the brand.
Right.
Because, you know, years and years of great franchisees building it, you're okay if they go just a little bit off with a social post. But at the beginning, if it's not aligned with your brand standards, that could be trouble.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You're open to more damage earlier on for sure. Tom, any thoughts on social media?
Yeah, you know, it's one of those, in some ways, a necessary evil, if you
Yeah.
will. I agree with everything that's been said, but it is a minefield because there is that, you know, it's hard enough to control a brand. It's hard enough to control how franchisees conduct themselves and interact under your umbrella, you know, with the consuming public. And now when they have this, you know, alternative form of communication that can, you know, I guess if they choose to go rogue, they can do it in a more, I guess, like a quicker, almost more deadly way. And you're going to find out later. And it's unfortunately a lot of what's put out on social media and on the internet is perceived to be true just because it's on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, you're trying to unring a lot of bells, and you're typically constrained for time because you're trying to play catch up. So I think the more that you can be out in front of it, obviously the more successful. But it's like anything else, you know, there's good and bad and everything, and it comes with some great attributes, but it also comes with potential danger.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's get to your hot take.
My hot take is more of a question, and that is, what is the state of the union in the franchise world in 2024? And so the reason I throw that out there is because, you know, I sit here and I'm thinking we're, I guess, almost 4 years now post-pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
COVID, you know, call it whatever you like. And are we at the point where we can say that's in the rearview mirror, or are we still living with it as it relates, you know, to franchising? You know, I'd say that it's probably a little bit of both. Um, I think we still do live with it on a franchisor side, just by example, where you may have had all your employees working at a home office, and now that's changed. And are you going back to everyone at the home office, or some remote? You know, so you have a hybrid situation. And if that's the case, what's the productivity level versus pre-pandemic? I
Mm-hmm.
think operating hours. You know, you may have in your units, you may have changed operating hours. Your employees, number of employees. So I still think there are true impacts that we're feeling, and I don't know whether we're in a quote new normal, or we're still defining, you know, a new normal, or are we on a path to going back to where we were? You know, so I think that's, you know, kind of TBD. I think also now that we're in election year, a lot can happen on the economic front, on the investment front. I think there's a tendency for people in an election year to kind of go to the sidelines because, you know, one thing that people don't like is the unknown. And so if you don't know who's going to be controlling, then you just wait, right? Because once an election happens, at least you have that level of certainty, whether you agree or not with,
Right.
you know, who's the winner, who's the loser. But at least you know, and then you can, you know, pivot or adjust accordingly. But I think right now, you know, we have 10 months of unknown coming at us.
Yep.
So I look at that. Then I look at where we are economically with conditions and, inflation and cost of product and supply chain. And so I think there's myriad factors that are kind of floating out there. And so I say, well, how are they all going to then kind of go through and distill down into a franchisor is trying to continue to, have a growth plan that they laid out, 2 years ago, and they're halfway through it. A franchisee who's thinking, maybe I'll go into business for myself. Is this the right time? Maybe a franchisor that was about to go borrow a significant amount of money, for growth, and now they put that off because interest rates aren't favorable. So my question is, where are we in 2024, and what is 2024 going to do to the franchise world?
Well, and I would say I hope that it is a new normal, because there was a lot of pain last year between, what I saw with the traffic counts across the brands that I was working with, in addition to and we alluded to it with Jennifer's hot take around how important local store marketing is. Our normal marketing, and I'm going to go to marketing because that's where I live, but our normal marketing activities weren't working in 23. So we had to do a lot of pivoting, and the pivoting was really hard because we were asking people to do hard things, to put more time and resources into marketing, to put more time and resources into marketing that was not going to convert immediately. And so I am hopeful that 24 is a level set year. We're coming out of 4 years post pandemic. Tom, I think that you hit it on the head. There's so much uncertainty, but we're almost existing in the uncertainty between,
Right.
What's happening globally, that I am very hopeful that 24 is a new normal, and we're setting a new benchmark for us to then start growing from again.
Yeah, I think that I think you're right. I think that we are surviving through it, but nobody wants to survive. They want to thrive, right?
Yeah.
And so how long do you want to just limp along surviving? And I think that's part of the uncertainty. So we need to know,
Right.
In a more global sense, where do we stand? Because the pandemic hit everybody differently. I have restaurant clients, some of whom it was the best thing that ever happened to them. They had all kinds of record sales because they would drive through concepts. Then I had other concepts that, like gyms, who got treated terribly as it related to money that was available. That not all the programs were made available to gyms like they were to restaurants, by example, because of the nature of the pandemic and the environment within a gym. It was, operating hours, you can imagine, just got pummeled. If not, they just closed and just never reopened. And then I'll give you like another side effect. So one of my most successful clients were already in the drive-through walk-up fast food business, and so the pandemic only helped them. But now, so many of their competitors, they're in the fried chicken space, but not just in the fried chicken space, are all now wanting to go to a smaller footprint that has drive-through. So now everyone's fighting and competing for space, whereas before I might have had 5 people I had to try to outposition. Now I may have 30 people I got to try to outposition. And so what's that going to do?
Well, that goes into franchise development too. You have now you're competing not only for space, you're competing for customers, and you're competing for your growth.
Right. And
I think it also goes back to local marketing, because a lot of people did not go into the field. They were too scared, especially in senior care. They were scared. We weren't allowed in, and our referral business is like 80% of where our leads come from. And so you would have some franchisees that would be very creative, or you have ones that stand and say, I'm going to lose business right now, and there's nothing I can do.
Yeah.
Well,
awesome. Those were awesome hot takes. Good discussion already. So let's jump into our question for today. So we are hearing from a franchisor who, I'll just read the question for us. So when we started our franchise, we set out a franchise fee structure that was similar but lower than our competitors. Now we have been in business for 5 years. We have 50 locations, and we are ready to start raising our fees. We'd like to roll out nominal increases in tech and marketing fees, which are allowed in our franchise agreement. Our existing franchisees are already complaining about our existing fees. Do you have any strategies on how to gain traction with these increases with the least amount of pushback? So I think this is something that we've all experienced. the fee conversation, and certainly it's something I'm experiencing in some of the brands that I'm working with right now. Who wants to kick us off?
I can.
Okay.
Yeah, I've definitely seen this, and I work with 3 different brands. Number one is communication. It is so key how you communicate, and you have to be transparent and strategic when you do this. You know, they want to hear, how is this going to benefit them? When they hear a franchisor is going to increase something in price, they're already thinking that, you know, us and me kind of scenario.
Yep.
So the number one thing too is also to highlight the value proposition, right? So how is this going to help them grow and make more money? Let's face it, that's the bottom line. And how it's going to affect the brand, but also the growth and profitability. Again, and you know, when it comes to communication, it's the best thing to do is a gradual rollout. I'm sure Tom's going to agree to that, you know, instead of just all at once, here you go, and they don't have a say. So you know, one thing that I have done in the past is a phased approach when it comes to any increases, but the feedback mechanism is really important too. So bring them all together on a team call, highlight the new change, let them have their voice. They want to be heard and valued and all that kind of stuff. I'll throw out also, if you have a franchise advisory council, an FAC, you can, you know, communicate it with them, bring them to the meeting to support the new change. Because sometimes they like listening to their peers instead of the franchisor. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love it. And Tom, I know, because I was there and watched you do this once already. So I know that you have a lot to add. I think that you'd agree with a lot that Jennifer put forth too.
Yeah, actually, I think everything that you said, because I was going to lead with, it's really, this is an example of where a franchise advisory council can be really critical. But even in the absence of that, just an ongoing and actually pre-announcement discussion, because this is, you know, a situation where this should not come and be sprung as a surprise, right? This should be something that, you know, you've kind of laid out the path as to you establish the why. And you very clearly, and with data and whatever, however else you establish the why, as to why you're at the point of this is now necessary. I think people understand, you know, things like, you know, certainly technology. You know, it is moving so fast, and things become obsolete so fast, and it's expensive, and so there's a huge need for that. So I used to tell franchisees, when I've said this, you know, now for 35 years, that I will listen to anything that you want to tell me about the brand, any way to improve it. I don't care who you are, what role you play, whatever connection you have to this brand. You could be a consumer, you could work in the home office, you know, as a cleaning person, you could be the CEO. If there's a way that we do something better, then let's hear it. I will listen to anything. But I just had some rules that said, when you ask with respect. Be as respectful as if we say no, than if we say yes. And it's got to be for the greater good. It can't just be for your situation. But I always ended with this. I said, look, I can't give you a vote, but I can give you a voice. And if you have been successful in communicating along the way and making the case, if you will, as to why this is coming, the need for it, because it also shows that you have foresight, that you're looking out ahead and saying, in order for us to get there 12 months hence, this is what we got to do now. And this is what we anticipate the cost would be. And so you justify what you're doing. You don't just make it look like a whimsical grab of money, because that's going to get you nowhere. They'll probably just get you sued, actually. So to me, it's more a function of having that line of communication firmly established from the beginning, having them understand the strategy, the why, and then this is, you know, a form of how we're going to get there. Are you going to convince them all? No, because franchisees, the longer they're in a system, the tendency they have is to kind of resent a little bit that they pay, and then when you got to tell them you got to pay more. But if you're doing things right as a franchisor, you're building a brand, the sales growth is there, the number of units growth is there. Because I remember when I was a Smoothie King and we did what we call it's a franchise business review. And it's a survey given to all your franchisees, and they can do it anonymously or they can give their name. And you ask them all, all these questions. And so they would delight in spending, 40 or 50 pages just beating you up, right? But at the there was a question that I always would go to first. The question was, basically, if you had to do it all over again, would you? And invariably the answer was yes. So then I knew we were doing something right. Okay, so then I'll take the criticism along the way. But it told me that there were effective levels of communication. There was buy-in to what was happening.
Yeah.
And so they're going to complain about the fee. Okay, I get it. But if you then follow it up with results, then the next time you go back, they're like, all right, these people, they know what they're doing. It's a little painful now, but I see I'm going to benefit on the a little bit further down the road. So I'm in. But I think it's a communication issue more than it's anything.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think I would echo that. And then and I think what Jennifer said was great. And it coupled with what Tom said, a lot of times I find that, we have to increase fees in order to grow the brand to where we want it to be. And so then our onus as franchisor is to communicate, how does that benefit the individual franchisee? So in addition to showing kind of like, here's how big we're going to be able to grow the brand with this extra contribution, we have to say, and this is how it's going to drive business to you. And so balancing both, like, it's for the greater good, but it's also going to benefit you.
And you can analogize it to, with them to, you have to raise price. You don't want to necessarily do it, but there's times you do it, and your consumer is going to react to that, right? And so what do? You try to placate it by offering better product, better service, better environment, whatever it is, because you're going to reinvest that money.
Yeah.
So
you can also educate them on industry standards and show some case studies. That's always good. Success stories that brands who have, increased their technology are the ones that are moving forward. And it goes right back to AI, right? So even in the technology that we're dealing with in healthcare, there is so much that has been added with AI. And the softwares, the platforms that don't have it, are the ones that are going to lose out, because more and more people are moving away and they want that AI. Why? Because it helps the franchisee get more organized and do less so they can work on their business. We just want them to work on their business.
Right. Yeah. And I think anytime you raise fees, it's going to be an issue. So setting yourself up for success from the beginning is also important. Thinking through, okay, if I want to be this brand and be a successful supporter of my franchisees, I've got to set the right fee structure up front. And I do think that sometimes brands will position themselves as lower than the competitor to try and get an edge on growth, but it causes other issues down the line where you will have to increase and you will have to have these conversations.
Yeah, and I know I'm showing my age, but these agreements are typically a minimum of 10 years with renewals. Could be 20, could be 30-year agreements we're talking about. And so when you write an agreement, when I first started doing this, we didn't have fax machines, no internet, none of this stuff. And so I think that's also can be explained to say, when we wrote this 10 years ago, there was an unknown world out there. If you want to play in it, because all your competitors are going to be playing it, then there's a price to it. And we couldn't have anticipated what that price would be 10 years ago or 15 years ago, but now we do. And so, and that's why it's written in a way to give the franchisor that ability, because that is the license to keep pace.
That is right.
Very well said. And I'll end us there because that was a perfect recap for that question. So thank you guys for those insights. I am going to be including Tom and Jennifer's contact information in our show notes if you want to continue the conversation with them there. Thank you guys again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.